Welcome to End is the Future, a podcast that brings together great minds to address the opportunities and challenges of making businesses both sustainable and profitable. I'm Ilham Kadri, the CEO of Science Co, and I'm delighted to be your host today. If you are as passionate about sustainable business as I am, let's explore how End is the Future together. Everyone, I'm thrilled to be here today with Phil Chambers, the CEO of Orbex. Philip is a leading entrepreneur who has played pivotal roles in some of Europe's most successful startups. He's now the CEO of Orbex, which is a UK-based launch services company in the small satellite industry. Orbex has developed one of the most advanced, low-carbon, high-performance micro-launch vehicles in the world. And at Science Co, we are proud to partner with Orbex to provide the advanced materials for their Prime rockets, which we'll hear more about soon. Phil, thank you so much for joining us today.
Ilham, thank you for having me. It's great to be on the show.
So, Phil, you are such a successful entrepreneur and you've been at the helm of several thriving tech startups before becoming the CEO of Orbex. I always like to find out where my guests got their spark. So was there a moment in your life that really instilled this entrepreneurial spirit in you, Phil? And I believe you grew up in the UK, right? Did it start when you were very young or did that passion come later?
I think it did start at a very young age, to be honest. Looking back on that, and I think you could probably blame my parents who instilled this entrepreneurial spirit. I spent this weekend with my brother. He's also an entrepreneur. I think, we never got any pocket money as children. So we were always kind of forced to do madcap schemes in order to, make a living, as it were. It started out at an extremely young age, keeping chickens, selling the eggs locally. Then we started building motorbike engines and outboard engines. We were buying broken ones, from classified ad sites, and then selling them on eBay. And then eventually got into building computers. And then, around 1997, the sort of internet came around, and I realized you could make a lot more money by building websites. And that's really where my sort of passion for technology came along. But I was fortunate enough to have my first computer bought for me for Christmas when I was age 5. And back in those days, you sort of had to program them. It was Commodore C16+4. So I was exposed to technology at a very early age, and I was always encouraged to, try things. And some of those schemes failed, and some of them succeeded.
Yeah. And what about space then, Phil? What drew you to this Orbex adventure? Were you always interested in space, or was it more the business side that attracted you?
I was actually very interested in space, like most children from a very, very early age.
Yeah. Dreaming about going to the moon, all right?
Yeah, I remember my book on the space shuttle, that I had in the 80s. Most kids, people my age, remember the Challenger disaster and, the various problems that NASA had at that time. So I was fascinated by spaceflight, and kind of from a very early age sort of put a stick in the ground and said I want to be an astronaut. By the time, university rolled around, and I did a computer engineering degree, and then rolled up at Airbus and said, I'm ready to join now. And they were like, oh, we're not hiring computer grads. So, for whatever reason, I ended up with this software career, but the space bug was there. And sort of around 2022, an investor of mine, Jimmy from Hardcore in Denmark, came to me and said, I've invested in this rocket company. And I was like, well, that sounds very interesting. And in the end, I ended up going to meet Orbex in Scotland, having a look around the factory, and all of that wave of passion from when I was a child came back, and I ended up investing in the company in 2022.
Yeah, amazing. And I know maybe for our audience that, the UK is not always thought as a space hub, right, Phil? But things are changing. I've heard you say before that there is a new space race in Europe and that the UK could emerge as the champion in this. what's interesting is that the UK government wants to become a hub for small satellite launches and emerging space transformation markets. Now, Orbex is going to play a key role in making this happen. You are actually building the UK's first ever vertical launch space rocket, and it's coming from a British majority-owned rocket and launching from British soil. This must be exciting, right? How does it feel to be such a bit part of transformation in the UK and Europe space landscape?
It's extremely exciting, but I think it's also necessary. If we take a walk back in history, the UK was actually a pioneer in satellite launching and had a leadership position back in the 60s with a rocket called Blue Streak. We did actually successfully launch a satellite from Australia. And then, we were involved in the very embryonic days of the Ariane program, but in the UK ended up stepping away from that program for various reasons. It was actually powering the stage one. And then, the European companies, particularly with France, Germany, Italy, Spain, became dominant with the Ariane program, very successful, the most successful commercial launcher in Europe. In the world, right? Had over 50% market share for a long time, for 40 years. And then, of course, NASA launched the COTS program in 2006, and a little-known company called SpaceX decided to enter. And then we all know what happened, right? Initially, they were dismissed, and then obviously they become absolutely dominant. So now you have this new wave of European startups coming up saying, maybe we could do things differently in Europe. Orbex, obviously, we're one of those companies. We have, of course, much competition from France, from Germany, from Spain. But we are indeed hoping to launch the first British-made rocket from British soil. And I think you've seen a real sea change in the sort of policy of the government, really, in the last 12 months, whereby previously the UK was seen, through geographical, good fortune as a great place to launch satellites, particularly into polar orbits. But now, with the new government coming in, you're seeing also the importance of that launch capability coming to the fore. Not only being a place to launch rockets, but also a place to manufacture them. With the UK already being a sort of world leader in satellite manufacturing, so the complete value chain being available from the United Kingdom.
And what is interesting, and this is the heart of this podcast, is the future, the A&D, right? The power of bringing opposite concepts or perceived opposite concepts into harmony. And not only are you going to make this happen, Phil, but you are going to do it sustainably, right? So, because Orbex has developed one of the most advanced, low carbon, high performance micro launch vehicles in the world, and you are using even bio LPG, 100% renewable fuel, which means you have the world's first bio-friendly fuel launch system, and slashes emissions by more than 90%. And this is amazing, because when you think that you need, obviously, to have such launches which are, energy hungry, right, and high emissions, right, type of mobility, you are, disrupting and slashing emissions by more than 90%, just unheard of. So how did you achieve this? And do you think what you've achieved on sustainability could influence the wider space industry, and why not even the aviation industry?
Yeah, great question. I think there have been three big problems with space launch and sustainability. One you already mentioned, which is the obvious one, which is the carbon dioxide emissions. And obviously the imperative to reduce CO2 in everything we do is absolutely clear. The second one is actually is slightly more esoteric, but the black carbon emissions, particularly with kerosene based, which is the traditional fuel, very similar to jet fuel, RP1. That does not burn very cleanly in a rocket engine, and you get a lot of sooting in the high atmosphere, which is a big problem. And the third one, of course, is space debris, which is an increasing issue. People leaving, unused or spent rocket stages in orbit. There've been collisions. People have been blowing up satellites and leaving debris. So we, from the outset, designed Orbex Prime to be the world's most environmentally friendly rocket. We wanted to align fully with ESA's Clean Space Initiative and the growing demand for sustainable launch, I think, from the industry and from institutional customers. We thought it made no sense whatsoever to launch satellites with Earth observation and sustainability use cases on launches with massive fossil fuel footprints. So we use bio-LPG. It's 100% renewable fuel source. It's sourced from plant and vegetable waste. So as you mentioned, cuts carbon emissions by up to 96% compared to a traditional approach. We also leave zero debris in orbit, and we have a reusable first stage. So ultimately, we can land the first stage and recover that and the 6 engines on there. And we've got a global patent on that in a dozen countries for this reflight technology. I think the space industry has traditionally relied on these high emission fossil fuels, but as we've seen, there's been an exponential growth in space launches over the last decade. So I think it's more important than ever now to build sustainable launch systems.
Yeah, this is amazing. And we are so excited and proud about the launch of Prime as a partner. And the Prime is your 19-meter long 2-stage rocket designed to transport small satellites into low Earth orbit. And by the way, we are also so proud to provide this advanced material for these rockets and so excited to see it launch. Can you tell our audience, Phil, more about the Prime rockets and how it's going to change the way satellite launches are done in the future?
Absolutely, yeah. So Prime is a 19-meter 2-stage rocket. It's designed to carry small satellites into low Earth orbit. Low Earth orbit, you can think of that around 500 kilometers above the Earth surface. So the International Space Station is about 400. A lot of LEO satellites about 500 and a little bit higher. So we've completely rethought and redesigned the vehicle to make it as light as possible. That's obviously where ScienceCo comes in with your advanced materials. We've used additive manufacturing for the majority of propulsion. We've used ScienceCo's carbon fiber and graphene composites for the main structures and tanks. We've built, speaking of the tanks, we've built a coaxial tanking system. You can think of this like a Russian doll. So you have high pressure helium in the very center. Then you have the LPG, the bio-LPG, and then at the outside you have liquid oxygen. You get densification of the LPG as with the oxygen jacket, and you also get reduced mass because you need less endomes. And we're the first company to build an entirely carbon fiber linerless coaxial tank working at cryogenic pressures in Scotland, and we've got another global patent on that. So we're incredibly proud of that achievement, and also wouldn't be possible without ScienceCo's material science behind it. So we've got 8 launches booked with customers likes of Surrey Satellite Technology, so one of the UK's premier satellite manufacturers, in-space missions, D-Orbit, enabling on-demand satellite deployment. And this is just the beginning. So Prime is our first rocket, but the technology will contribute to the next generation of larger and sustainable launch vehicles.
Wow. So for our audience who may not know, when will the Prime rocket launch and can our listeners watch it, Phil?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first launch is due to take place later this year, towards the end of this year. Keep an eye on Orbex Space on your socials. Please do follow us. We will giving all the details in the lead up to that. So the launch will take place from an island called Unst. That's the third of the Shetland Islands, the most northerly tip of the UK. There will be some management and planning in place, so don't just rock up. Please do look at the social channels. There will be safe and responsible places to watch, obviously live streams and all of that stuff. So, we will let you know.
And we'll be with you. ScienceCo will be watching and counts on us to follow that. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities in these particular markets of small satellite launches? Because no space launch is without risk, right? Do you ever have technical setbacks? And I think you may face many, in the journey of the launches. And how have you managed this? And what has that taught you?
Yeah, I think you've got many challenges. It's obviously a regulated environment. A lot of the regulation is new. So you're working through kind of the Space Act, which is fairly new to the UK, working with the regulator alongside the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK to make sure it's safe. You've also got the challenge of financing effectively a deep tech company, but with space launch, you don't get paid until you start launching rockets. So you have a very long period of time where you're developing technology, but you're getting no revenue. So securing financing for that period is challenging. I would say that, any rocket program carries risks, particularly one where you're trying to do lots of innovation. So, a completely new engine system architecture on a new fuel. It's not just a question of changing the fuel out, a completely new tanking system that's never been done before. So many new things and structures. But if you look at every single subsystem, they all have new development, which obviously brings with it the promise of great margin improvements and the ability to iterate rapidly. But as I'm sure know in Science Co, when you're developing new technology, not everything always goes to plan. So we've built resilience into our development processes. Obviously, we learn from the challenges and the setbacks that we have, but we continue to push this technology forward.
Yeah, and I want maybe to switch gears now and talk more about company culture too, because I heard you say once that you neglect the core values of your company at your peril, and indeed at Science Co and in my career, the core values and the purpose of any company is at the end of the day the soul of the company, and I couldn't agree more. It's all about purpose, isn't it? How have you built these core values in your company, in the companies you've run?
Yeah, I think core values are not just something that you can pay lip service to, and it's not just something that management can say, okay, well, these are the core values.
Yeah,
I think it's really important to try and distill what it is that's unique about your company and what it is that's unique about the purpose and why you are doing what you're doing, why you exist, and really taking all the employees on a journey to try and codify that. I've been through the exercise at a number of companies, and I think end of the day, it's important to involve every employee, or at least give everyone the opportunity to input on the process. And you need to, and it's not going to be a quick process. This is something that takes a while to distill and to wordsmith. And at the end, you need to come out with a set of values that, really, when you read them back to yourself, they need to sound like they're uniquely you. And I think really capture the essence of what it means and why people are excited to come and work at a company. And too many times, I've seen companies go through this exercise and come up with, 6 generic words. You're like, well, I think you need to ask yourself, could these words describe, another company? If the answer is yes, then you probably haven't captured it properly. I think it's a lot of people pay lip service to this or ignore it, but the reality is, if you're scaling in the long term, I think that value is absolutely foundational to really hold people to account of what it means to work at a company, how you expect people to behave, and indeed, if people are not doing that, what happens. So it underpins everything we do, and I would highly recommend any CEO or listening to this podcast, if they're not happy with their values, to really have a look at those and go through that exercise.
Yeah, and I'm sure this resonates a lot with the Science Co explorers. We don't call ourselves actually employees, but the explorers. Our company was born out of a vision of innovation, and we split from a 160-year-old survey. And we had actually to redefine who we are, from finding a new name to a branding to your right purpose, why we do exist, why when we separate from a 160-year-old company, what's in there for us. And we had, to really reinvent ourselves. And it was, you're right, one of the best exercises I've ever done in my 30 years of career, right? And 10 years of CEO is really to sit down and think deeply about our purpose and why we exist and how to embark the source, the mindset, the hearts of our employees, of our customers, of the communities where we work. I can just agree with you. I know lots of listeners still are young entrepreneurs, and we see you as a role model. And as you know, this podcast is all about how we can be both sustainable and profitable in businesses. And you are such a great example of this. What advice would you give business leaders, young entrepreneurs who want to create thriving startups that are also sustainable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that it's not something that can really be bolted on, right? You have to integrate this in your business from the start. Either in your, the product vision, the way you work. It needs to be fundamental to the business model, and it needs to sort of work synergistically with that. We decided we want to have as close to zero carbon launches as possible. That meant that we had to then start saying, okay, well, we need to design a new engine that's not been built before. We need to look at a tanking system that's never been done in order to, 10 years later, end up with a zero carbon launcher. But I do then believe that you can prove that sustainability does create value, either through saving cost, be with increased appeal to investors, with increased appeal to, institutional customers for sure. But I think in the long term, the whole market, we're living in a very interesting time politically right now. Maybe some people feeling we're taking a couple of steps back, on the Paris Agreement and what have you. But I think the long-term trend is clear. We need to build zero carbon products and systems, and that, I think the companies that do that and countries that do that are going to have a competitive advantage long term. So I don't think this bump in the road is something to be worried about. And take action now, right? Don't wait for the perfect moment to start. The businesses leading the next wave of innovation are solving tomorrow's challenges today. So go and do it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful advice. I'm sure, like a lot of our guests, your work is your passion, and we can hear it, we can see it in your career path. But everyone needs to unwind, right? What do you enjoy doing when you are not focused on launching rockets into the space?
Well, I'm fortunate enough that Orbex is in a beautiful place on the Mauritia coast in northern Scotland. When I took the job in Forres, where our rocket factory is, I bought a house in the Findhorn village just down the road, which is on this incredible estuary where you get hundreds of thousands of water birds, waterfowl, geese, ducks. So my passion is really bird watching. I've spent quite a lot of time doing it. And indeed, just prior to Orbex, after I finished with my last company, Peacon, I took 6 months off and I went on a mission to try and see every species of penguin in the world. So there are 19. Maybe I should add that as a quiz question, Ilham, but I managed to do 15. So I will be returning to get the rest at some point in the future.
So few more to come. Amazing. So you are a bird watcher and you look at the sky, right? And we're aiming for the space. Well, thank you so much, Phil, for coming on the podcast. I loved hearing about how you are making launches more efficient and more sustainable. And I'm sure you have been inspiring many around you, and definitely our listeners today, that sustainability and making business and profitability real, it's part of any journey, right? And you've inspired our audience to go for the launch, whether it be a new product, a new business, or a rocket into space. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thanks for the invite, Ilham. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us today. For more information or to listen to other episodes, visit our website. And if you like these podcasts, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, be safe.